Hi, my name is Jaffel Versi. I'm an associate in the structures group at Arup in Sheffield. The project I'd like to talk about is a project we're doing with a relatively large organisation who run a series of schools and hospitals worldwide. They're set up as a charitable foundation, and so they do. They've got a number of schools, a number of hospitals worldwide, and they're looking at a new program where they're developing 18 schools around the world, most of which are in conflict zones. The brief is quite challenging for these. The requirement is for a campus that is rooted in the local vernacular, the architecture, that is an inspiring place to live and to work, but is not so gaudy and overawing that it scares people or doesn't give people the opportunity to develop where they're not feeling comfortable. All of the schools run the same academic program, so they all have to have a similar sort of accommodation. But the challenge is that the architecture needs to be entirely different, and all of these things knitted together actually make things quite difficult. One of the things that we've been doing is talking to local engineers and architects to try and understand the requirements and the drivers from the local perspective, and that has been a really interesting thing to do. Talking to local engineers who've had huge problems with local infrastructure and working out how they get around those problems, issues like power that only is on for 10 to 12 hours a day, where water doesn't always turn up, where you've got a climate which requires air conditioning but you haven't got enough power to drive air conditioning units around the site, and electricity is incredibly expensive. So talking to all of these clients and the local engineers and architects has been absolutely fascinating. And one of the things that has really come to light and really been highlighted to me is the importance of just talking and to go in without this preconception that as a Western firm of engineers or Western firm of architects that we have all the answers and we know what the client needs and how things should be delivered, because quite often these people are doing incredible things in very difficult circumstances and have come up with some really clever ways of dealing with the lack of infrastructure or the lack of materials or even the lack of skills in the local construction market. So it is really important to talk to people to try and understand what can be done and, if necessary, to try and see what can be developed. It's been my experience that when you do go in and you talk to people, they are usually very, very receptive because they can see the benefit for themselves to try and broaden their horizons and to try and see what is done in other parts of the world, what sorts of things can be delivered, and how they get from where they are to where they want to be, and to take those little steps to try and increase the availability of technology and the skills and the resources. And so usually when you start the dialogue, things just start to flow. It becomes a really, really good conversation and a really really progressive, very, very nice feeling when you've had this fantastic chat about how good things could be if you all got together and all the problems were solved. One of the other interesting things that we've found is that you need to understand the local context and how language works and very slight cultural sensitivities. One of the projects we've been working on is centred around is in East Africa, where we have a number of people who actually speak Swahili. But one of the things that's been really interesting is that if you talk to professional people in their local language, it's not always helpful, and one of the things that we found was that talking to professionals in Swahili sort of implies that they're not well educated enough to have been able to speak English, which they regard as the language of business. And so it's a matter of pride to them that they can hold a technical conversation in your language and hold their own in a foreign language. That's been a really interesting thing to learn.
Thank you very much.